So, welcome to the More Right Writer podcast. I'm Beth Stanton, NAFI's Director of Publications and Editor. This is The Writers Behind the Stories, a series where we meet some of the contributors to NAFI publications. Today, we have two guests who aren't just legends in their own minds, but kind of actual legends. We are going to have a whole lot of BS on this show. We have Barry Schiff, Brian Schiff, and Beth Stanton. BS cubed. Barry Schiff has flown 364 types of aircraft during his 72 years of flying. He is a retired TWA captain and a prolific author. He has written almost 2,000 articles that have appeared in 116 military and civil aviation publications. He's been writing for AOPA Pilot Magazine for 61 friggin' years. Ryan Schiff is a member of NAFI's board of directors. He is a 38-year Gold Seal flight instructor and FAA safety team representative. He is a captain for a major U.S. airline and has accumulated 21,000 hours in 98 different aircraft types. BS's, welcome to the show.
Thank you, BS.
Thanks. I've read all those articles.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is going to be a wide-ranging interview here. And, you two, I'm sure the apple hasn't fallen very far from the tree. So it's going to be really
The tree
fun.
is on a hill.
Just, what rolls downhill, Brian?
Yeah.
So, Barry, since we're going to start with beauty and not age here, Barry, you've not just written aviation articles over your illustrious career, you've also written a bunch of aviation books. So, to start off our conversation here today, we're going to be talking about how contributing to aviation publications and the written word and how that contributes to not just certified flight instructors and educating them, but just general aviation overall. So what motivates you to write? I mean, how do you have the time between all those aircraft types and hours in the sky? How do you have time to write all these articles and books? And what motivates you?
What motivates me is that sometimes I write something and find out later that somebody actually liked it. And so it makes you feel good. And on rare occasion, you write something that actually helps someone perhaps fly a little better, perhaps fly a little safer. And there's not much better than that. It's very satisfying, very gratifying.
So do you find writing a challenge, or do you find it a joy, a little of both, a little of neither? Tell us a little bit about like your process. For example, how did you start writing for AOPA? And, obviously you've written a lot of stuff for them over all those years. You have to keep coming up with new material.
That's the most difficult part, coming up with something to write about every month. But believe it or not, things do pop up. I began writing really when I had a little aviation publishing company when I was going to college, and I produced and wrote aviation recordings. I don't know if you remember what LP records are. You're probably way too young for that, but I made them for educational purposes, in the air, in-flight recordings.
Okay.
And I got a call one day from AOPA Pilot Magazine, the editor, a fellow named Max Courant, and he said, can you write a little article about how you do that, how you make those records in flight? And I said, well, I can try. And he said, don't worry about it being any good or not. We'll fix it up here in the office if it doesn't read well. And I said, well, okay, that gives me some confidence. So I wrote a little article. They published it. And then lo and behold, about a month later, they called me back and said, would you like to write an article about desert flying, because you're out there in Southern California? And I said, well, I can try. And it just snowballed along after that.
How fascinating. I did not know that origin story. I'm just thinking this is like pre-YouTube. Now you have guys up in the cockpit on social media recording. You were doing that years ago before it was cool, Barry.
Actually, that's true.
So, Brian, let me ask you a question. What was it like growing up with this guy?
Well, it was
Easy, easy.
there was a lot of discipline involved, a lot of being smacked in the head with a sectional. Uh, I think it made me a better pilot, having him as my flight instructor. But you know, just hanging around the guy, having lunch at the airport, and seeing people come up to him and say hello because they knew him, uh, gave me an appreciation of what I was dealing with here as my father. So I'm like, okay, but he was a great instructor. He taught me things, helped me to understand things, and even in school, when I had trouble with word problems in algebra, he showed me easy ways to figure it out. So to answer your question, hard act to follow, but falling short, you still do pretty well.
Well said. So, we learn by example, and having Barry is your dad, was quite a good example. Okay, so now Barry, you're busting out your records that he has re recorded over the years. Oh my gosh, do you have an LP player where you could listen to those?
Yeah, can we listen to those?
No, but I do have them on DVDs.
That is so cool. My gosh, those are collector's editions.
But you remember hearing, if you see an old newscast or an old TV show, the way they talked back in the 60s and 70s, and you listen, air traffic control was like that too. ATC clears, Cessna. It was kind of funny. But what they say in there and the communications that went back and forth, all that still applies.
Don't you still talk like that?
Yeah, in my sleep.
So we learn by example, and what I was saying a second ago is, having the elder BS here is your example was such a wonderful head start for your illustrious aviation career as well, Brian. So tell me a little bit about how your dad's educational outreach to general aviation. You grew up with him contributing not just to making CFIs in the cockpit, but educating on a larger scale. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you do in the aviation education realm besides just teaching pilots in the cockpit.
Yeah, well, I have found that when he teaches me something that I don't understand, it was very helpful. I learned a lot of techniques of teaching from Dad. And when he would explain something to me I didn't get, and if I didn't get it the first way, he'd come up with another way to teach it. He'd find a way until it got through, until it clicked. It wasn't just, checking boxes when he was teaching me to fly. And fast forward to when I was, I got my flight instructor certificate at the age of 18, so about 5 years ago. And when I started teaching, I automatically started, like parents will automatically raise their kids, new parents will raise their children the way that their parents raised them. It's just kind of like you just default to the same disciplinary measures, the same way of teaching them or bringing them up. Well, I kind of turned into him when I became a flight instructor. And so I started teaching people to fly as a flight instructor. I started realizing, okay, some people have a more difficult time understanding something. And if they're not understanding and correlating what I'm teaching, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep digging until we get in there and we get something understood. Uh, and it forced me to become very creative. So I've put together, a lot of things that I would give my students that would help them, whether it be a flow chart to make a decision or um, a simple way to understand this or that. And I kind of picked up that technique from Dad because when he wanted to teach his students something, he would write an article about it. So he didn't just teach one student, everybody got the benefit of what he was trying to get across. Well, I started doing the same thing and kind of collecting these little handouts that I gave. Not as many of those were published, obviously. I've got a bunch of them on my website, but people kept asking me for more and more. And then people started coming to me to learn to fly from me, and for me to be their instructor. And I got so busy that I decided, okay, I'm just going to start raising my rates, and eventually they'll say no. Well, I kept raising my rates, but people wouldn't say no. They would pay it. And I learned a valuable lesson that if you make it worth it, people will pay. And I started really excelling in that way. And I wanted to pick it up where, in this day and age, it's more, and Dad's done a lot of videos too, and they're on DVD and VHS, and I put some of them on YouTube for him. And I decided, well, I'd like to do more teaching as well like that. But it started with seminars as a FAA safety team rep. And before that, I was, what would they call it before that? The aviation safety counselor or something. And so I gave in-person seminars, and I kept being asked to do webinars because you can reach so many more people. And I didn't really want to do that. I like interacting with people and responding to the room. And when they fall asleep, I know I can see them falling asleep and I need to pick up the pace or something. But COVID came around and kind of forced my hand into doing things online. And lo and behold, it stuck, it took off. And so I started doing more and more, and it's just taken off with a lot of success.
Well,
We have
it's so
an expression, if he teaches, they will come.
Right.
Well, it's just so, thanks for sharing that, Brian. And it's really just such a joy to see how you both are so really jazzed up and passionate about passing along this information to your fellow aviators and getting really creative about the different ways. And, you know, you, Barry, like your technology, you started making the records and then AOPA and the DVDs. And then we've, fast forward to online and social media and videos and webinars. And it's like the technology has changed, and the method of disseminating the information has changed, but that information is still, it needs to be out there. So we're so lucky that we have all of these different touch points now, and the written word is still there too. So, and that's why we both, here talking to you guys today about the contributions that you've made to NAFI publications and all different kinds of publications over the years. Barry, but before we talk a little bit more about that, I'd like to circle back to you, because Brian just got done talking about what it was like having you for a dad and the influence that you had on him. I'd like to ask you, what was it like having this guy and sort of raising him up to be a pilot and a man that you're proud of?
Do I really have to be truthful? Actually, it was pretty exciting in a way, because there aren't that many fathers who have.
Such talented sons.
I knew you were going to say that. He's telling me that too. There aren't that many fathers who have a son or a daughter who follow in their footsteps in such a way that it makes them realize they've done the right thing in life. Because if you can raise someone who decides they want to do what you do, it means you're doing right. And that was the biggest thrill I got out of Ryan. I never tried to push flying on him, not at all. I never asked him if he wanted to learn to fly.
It made it difficult for me to finally get to that point, though. I will say, he never pushed it, never talked about it. And when I finally asked him, he pulled me out to the garage and opened up this box out of a cabinet that he'd been saving and waiting for me to ask him that question. What do I have to do to learn how to fly? And out came charts and plotters and all the fun things that you get to play with learning how to fly. I'm like, holy cow, he'd been waiting for me to ask.
Yeah, I was hoping he would, and he finally did. And it was a great joy. He had beaucoup hours of flying time before he was old enough to solo. And I'll never forget the day he soloed, getting his driver's license and his solo at the same day. That was kind of exciting. And he didn't realize it when he soloed that we had the whole family down there hiding behind the bushes. And it was fun. It was really great fun. And then when he became a TWA pilot, then a TWA captain, it just made me feel fantastic. I knew I'd done the right thing.
That's very heartwarming, both of you. We should make a Hallmark movie
Well,
starring.
then, you just fast forward to the end. At last minute, we'll kiss.
So what I would like to talk about now is I like to, on this show, I like to talk a little bit about sort of how we make the sausage, a little bit about behind the scenes. Because, when people open up Mentor magazine and they see all the articles there in living color with pictures, or they open up the eMentor weekly newsletter and they see all the information that's in there, you just kind of like take for granted, of course, this information is here. Of course, this is, but there's a lot of machinations behind the scenes that get that stuff out there so NAFI members can, consume this content. So one of the really exciting things we would like to talk about today is Brian is going to be authoring a new column in eMentor newsletter. I'm going to read the boilerplate. Can I read the boilerplate, Brian? The intro?
All right,
Or do you want
go
to?
for it. No,
So,
you do it. I don't.
okay, so you guys, first of all, here's the title of the column: CFI Care.
You need to see it written to really appreciate the
CFI,
the meaning.
CFI letters care. I love it. Everybody like thinks for a second and then bursts out laughing when I tell it to
Yeah,
them.
see if I care.
CFI Care. CFI Care is a column offering bite-sized nuggets of knowledge with aviation educator and NAFI board member Brian Schiff. Schiff combines irreverent humor and entertaining storytelling to help explain misunderstood topics in a brief, easy to understand way. Now, I really love this. I asked Brian to give me the like what this was about, and this was the what he gave me. He said, "Too many pilots have a fundamental misunderstanding of some basics. I want to impart my 40 years of figuring out how to teach them before I forget." Which I just love that. So, but here's the thing. This is all about passing along the knowledge. We talk about aviation, it's such a tribal knowledge-based endeavor. We have to pass this along. And so, for example, it starts, Barry Schiff has all of this information that he passed along to Brian Schiff. Brian Schiff learned all this stuff, and now he wants to pass it along to NAFI members. And the fact that you have 40 years of teaching and you have the experience to say, this is the stuff that people struggle with. Let me put this forth in a real concise, easy to digest, understandable, boom, kind of like it. I just love that. So Brian is going to be writing this column for eMentor. So my question to you, Brian, is why did you decide you wanted to start writing this content besides me twisting your arm to do it?
Well, I want to get to more people at once, and to get this content from me is an indirect passing. I took that baton from Dad, and this is where a lot of that information came from, and I'm just going to be paying it forward, passing along. That's where a lot of this came from, was from him. Although I've found different ways to explain certain things when somebody doesn't quite get something. But I think what I'm seeing a lot of is flight instructors trying to get to the magic 1,500 hours and not having the passion. I mean, I kept teaching after I got my the dream job, and I really I really do enjoy the teaching part of it. So when I see a fundamental misunderstanding of this or that, I want to clear it up. I'll sit there teaching. I remember teaching in a general aviation terminal at San Jose Airport where I'm giving ground to my student, and the next table over, another instructor is giving ground, and I hear them teach something incorrect. Now, you got to be tactful about that. I would never correct an instructor in front of their student. But when I heard that, it motivated me to just like, hey, okay, just so you know, you taught this, and maybe you want to clear that up because here's this. And I guess I have a way of doing that without really pissing people off, because I would have thought that if someone came to me and said, you taught that wrong, I'd get pissed. But it's in the way that you talk to people, and there's a way to talk to people and make them feel comfortable about you and the way that you're going to be giving them advice. And I think that's the knack that somewhere along the line I picked that up. And I don't know where I got that tact or whatever, but I can say things to people like, I have so many friends that when people say something to me, I'm not really wild about it. I just say, look, I'm going to cut back on some of my friends, and I just don't think you're going to make the cut. I've got too many. And I'm being serious, but they think I'm joking. I'm kidding.
So Barry, do you, it sounds like your son has emotional intelligence or sort of like social
Emotional
intelligence.
problems.
What's that? Did you say social problems?
No, no.
I have emotional issues from our vacations together when we wouldn't get out of bed in the motel in time to go on the tour of the Grand Canyon. So Dad would come in with a bucket of ice, and he would make sure that we got up.
It sounds like
Ice found itself in strange places.
It's he finds creative ways to get you to do what he wants. And that's what I do with students. So like if I have, for example, a student that routinely lands on the left side of the runway, and this is a common error that students have, I want to motivate them. It's about motivation to do better. And you keep landing on the left side. I remember a line that Dad taught me, and I use this all the time still, is, it's just as easy to land on the center line as it is to land on the left side of the runway. And you'd think that would be true, but then why is someone always on the left side of the runway? So I tell them, look, this lesson's free if you can put that nose wheel on the center line on this next landing. And invariably that would always cost me money, but it taught me that with the right motivation, people will perform well. And so that's what it's about, is you've got to motivate someone to perform well. You can't just tell them to do it.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's I hope the CFI is listening out there would need great motivation.
All three of them. I want them all to hear this. But the column that I'll be writing for the e-mentor, and I hope that people will read it. I hope that it gets a new light. I mean, we get so many newsletters, we're inundated, but I wanted to add some educational content and some fun to that newsletter. So the first one is titled "Let's Have Some Fun" or something like that, and we're going to talk about what's coming up, and I'm just going to teach some of the techniques that I've picked up. Like, I don't know how many hundreds of times I have to see a student do something wrong before I come up with a good way to make that never happen again. And I've told these little tidbits of advice to other instructors, and they've just been like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd have known that 5 students ago.
Well,
So,
it's what's really Brian, we thank you so much for this. And again, for our listeners here, NAFI Publications is a volunteer basis
wait,
publication. So
what?
mentor and e-mentor.
Wait a minute. He's not being paid for this? Brian,
thought
what
we
did I
were-
teach you?
Giving away free flight lessons, Barry. All those guys are landing on the center line now. So, and especially to do a column like this. So if you guys read Mentor, which I'm sure all of you do, we have 2 columns, the right seat advice column and the on your wing meet a member column. And, we do bi-monthly publications. So those guys are on the hook 6 times a year to write those columns. Brian is on the hook here now. So it is a real commitment, and you have to be dedicated. People write for Mentor Magazine, contribute an article, or, we have regular contributors who I have several of their articles in my bank. Like, for example, Boots writes a bunch of articles. We have some other folks who write a bunch of articles, but that's not being on the hook every fill in the blank for a feature, for a column. So it is a commitment, Brian, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I thank you for saying that. I have a lot of this already. I have a lot in my head, obviously, because this is just all you have to do is get out there in the world, start teaching, and you're going to realize the things that need more attention. And I think I've already started 22 of these. So I'm going to have them in the bank. And then even on top of that, uh, I just recently went up for a flight review, and I can't help but teach something. I'm not just going to observe. And I had the guy tell me, "Oh gosh, I wish you were my instructor. I learned more from you in 10 minutes than I have, with 5 hours with this other guy or whatever." And I'm not trying to put someone else down. I'm not trying to hurt myself, patting myself on the back. It's just that I care enough to keep going, to offer what I have, and everything that I do, there's something more that you can give and offer. And so this content, while it is a commitment to do that, many of them, they're already here. It's stuff that I've picked up over the years, so it's not going to be that difficult.
You care, CFI care.
If I care, yeah.
CFI care. Well, and again, in full disclosure of how we make the sausage here, we've been talking about putting educational content in eMentor for quite a while here, the board and Paul and everybody. And we go back and forth about, okay, what's going to look like and who's going to do it and that kind of stuff. So the fact that Brian stepped up to the plate and is doing it now, we're really thrilled. Brian, one time we were having a little conversation about the newsletter, and he did bring up something about that boring eMentor newsletter.
I would never have said that
Which,
to your face.
I take all the feedback that I get, and all joking aside, how can we make it more interesting? So Constant Contact is our email server, or the platform that we use. We have one of the highest open rates in the industry. So NAFI members are really engaged, and they really appreciate the content we create, but we're always looking like, how can we make it better? What can we add? How do we make it more valuable for folks? So
Well,
go ahead.
well, I hope this puts the chocolate chips in that cookie. I hope that my column will add a little bit to it and makes people look forward to getting that a little bit more. And I know, when Dad writes, everybody I talk to says, "Oh," and they learn who my father is. They say, "I go right to his articles first, or I go right to his column and his test pilot," and I hope that people will do that with this. Although I won't be paid as much as he is for that, but I don't think he does it for the pay.
I'll go to it first, Brian.
Oh, good. There's one.
So Barry,
I tell you, that's the fear of trying to follow in Dad's footsteps, is that he's the toughest critic. I'm the toughest critic. He's the second toughest critic. And, the fear of falling short is a real one.
it is, and so for all of us perfectionists and overachievers out there, you just got to step up and do it. And okay, so let's just use, for example, Brian. Brian submitted his first draft for his first column to me, and then I read it and made some edits. And then he's like, "Hey, wait, I made it better." And he sent the second one. And then he's like, "Wait, no, I have a better one." And he sent me the third one. And we had a conversation about, nothing has ever been written that that the author will not go in there and keep editing it. And I said, thank God that things eventually get published, because we just keep editing them. So at some point, we have to get it out into the world. And is it going to be perfect? Most likely not. But here's the thing, the more you do it, the more you find your groove, the more you get better. And here's the other thing, you guys, it doesn't have to be perfect to be valuable for folks. And so Barry, you're exhibit A on this. When you started doing your recordings on the record years ago and got picked up by AOPA, you evolved immensely over the years as a writer and as an educator. So I'd like to hear from you a little bit about the books that you've written. So, you've done the Proficient Pilot column for AOPA. Has that column gone for, how many years has the column gone for?
Oh, about 32, 33, 34 years, I think.
Wow.
I started writing for AOPA in 1963, but the column didn't come till maybe 30 years later. And then, of course, that quiz test pilot, I enjoy that. I have so much fun with that. People keep writing to me all the time. They keep saying, "I can't get 100% in that quiz, not ever." And I said, that's the point. If you could answer the questions easily, you wouldn't learn anything.
Tell me a little bit about that quiz for our listeners who aren't familiar with it.
Oh, you're not.
I said,
Every month in AOPA Pilot Magazine, I have a quiz called Test Pilot. And these are not ordinary questions. These aren't the type of things you get asked on an FAA written exam, for example. These are really fun stuff. Like, why do we call it a cockpit? For example.
I know why.
Don't laugh, Brian. I mean, come on, it's a legitimate question.
We can't call it that anymore, though.
Why, for example, when the field is foggy, do we call it socked in? There are a lot of fun things in aviation, especially in our history, that are fun to bring forward these days. Plus, there's a lot of fun stuff I introduce in Test Pilot. It's a fun quiz. It's really fun.
I
Nobody
will
ever
agree with that.
100%.
I love that. How about your books? Tell us a little bit about the evolution from the first book you wrote, and how many have you written? You know, you talked about your thousands of articles and the 116 publications. Tell us a little bit about the books that you've written and why you.
13 books.
Wow.
Some okay, some good. Two of them were novels, aviation novels. One was called The Vatican Target, about hijacking an airplane that's carrying the Pope. That was kind of fun to write. I did that with my closest friend, Hal Fishman, who was a newscaster here in Los Angeles. And we wrote a second novel together called Flight 902 is Down. These were fun novels. You can pick them up on Amazon for $1 or $2. They're not very good. They didn't do very well, but
I think they were good. I enjoyed reading them, and I read them when I was pretty young.
you had to.
I also enjoyed them. I thought they're good stories.
My three best books, I think, are the Proficient Pilot volumes 1, 2, and 3. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Then my latest book, I think, is I'm very proud of it. It's designed to attract people into flying, to get them enthusiastic about flying. It's called An Illustrated Guide to Flying. It's something that most pilots know all about, but they don't know how to introduce the material in a way that makes other people excited about the thought of learning to fly. And that's what that book is about.
Well, and I'm very pleased to own a signed copy of that book. Thank you so much, Barry, for sending that to me.
My pleasure. If you can't sell them, you give them away.
We
No,
really
they
appreciate.
are selling.
We've reprinted in Mentor Magazine some of the columns that you've had published in AOPA, and there is just wonderful content. Some of this stuff is truly timeless, and we appreciate sharing that with NAFI members. I'm sure most NAFI members are familiar with you and have already read it in AOPA Pilot, but a lot of this kind of stuff, it never hurts to be reminded of. And you know, it's always good to bring it to the forefront. Brian, you've printed stuff. We've had stuff in a Mentor magazine that you've put together for us about AirVenture. You've done tremendous amount of volunteer work for NAFI. So we just so appreciate. We couldn't have NAFI publications without you guys, without people saying, "Hey, I'm going to contribute to this because I'm passionate about this cause." I would like to ask a question to each of you. Well, same question, you guys can think about it, but I'm going to put Barry on the hot seat first. So you've written a lot of stuff over the years. Think about one instance where somebody read something that you wrote and reached out to you and told you how that impacted them, that just really stuck with you.
Well, beyond people writing to say something has impacted them, were a few occasions where, well, one in particular, where a woman wrote to me and wrote that something I had written enabled her husband to save the day during an emergency and save their lives.
Wow.
It doesn't get better than that. And if you can do that once during your career, it's all been worthwhile.
Amazing. Wow, that's huge. All right, Brian. So again, you got to
I
follow
can't
that.
top that. I would like to think that some of my teachings have prevented an accident. I haven't gotten the feedback to know if it's happened or not, but I don't know of any of my students that have gotten any accidents yet, knock on wood. But I have found that not so much the written word, although speaking of the written word, you know, someone asked me, a friend of mine asked me once, what is the best invention ever that in humankind? And you know, you think the wheel, fire, blah, blah, blah. And the answer, her answer was the written word. And I think if you think about that, And every time you mention the written word, it makes me think of that, how valuable that is. And I think it is one of humanity's best inventions, because look at the documentation we're doing. And Dad's proficient pilot books, I still read them. I still go to it when I want to bone up on a certain topic. Uh, Everything is in there, and he does it in a way that simplifies things so you can actually understand it. And I think that, so I'll answer your question in a second. So I know I'm drifting, but I don't want to lose this thought.
You're on the center
And
line, Brian. No.
no, I can't. I've never. I slalom the center line. That's what I do. So, but I have heard people accuse Dad, and now I'm getting the same thing, of oversimplifying something when I'm explaining it. And so, before I answer that question, I would actually just like to ask Dad, what's your response when someone says, well, aren't you oversimplifying that? Don't you think that's a little bit too, it may not be 100% scientifically accurate, but what is that simplicity doing? The fact that you make someone understand something in a simpler way, uh, where if you try to, I'm answering it for you, but I think I've heard you answer it. But it's better that they have a correlation and understanding of the simple explanation that leads to better piloting than to try to understand the lift equation and stall the airplane in doing so. Is that making sense?
You answered that, Brian.
Yeah, so that's what I think that, and so I'm kind of getting the same accusations of, hey, you're oversimplifying that, and it's not really, doesn't really work that way. And I said, okay, you tell your students how it really works, and they won't understand it. I'll tell my students a little, you know, oversimplification, but they'll understand it in a way that will make them fly the airplane better.
Well,
And that's the goal.
It's interesting because you can explain things in a way that enables people to understand something, but it doesn't help them. For example, I can teach you, or anyone for that matter, the way a differential works in an automobile. And it would explain how the different tires rotate at different speeds. Will that make you a better driver? Absolutely not. You don't have to know a damn thing about a differential to be a good driver. But in aviation, there are things that we should have a concept that enables us to appreciate things a little better. Do we have to know why the pistons go up and down in the engine? No, we don't. No, we don't. But there are things we should know that give us a better understanding and a better appreciation. They lead to a better appreciation and understanding. They don't necessarily make us a better pilot.
Right. And so I'm getting some of those as well now. I'm getting people come up to me trying to correct me, but I will stand not corrected because I'm okay with my answer. I'm fine with telling a pilot that this is all you need to understand about why it does that. As long as you behave this way, you won't hurt yourself.
So
But
I have some input here on this.
yeah, what is it?
So there's a difference, as you're talking about this, there's a difference between simplifying and dumbing down. So
Good point.
perhaps when a person comes up to you and accuses you of simplifying something, perhaps they think you're dumbing it down. And they're two very different things. You know, when I think of dumbing it down is you're not conveying the stuff you need to know, because the person doesn't need to know it. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a difference between the two. And simple, it's like in cooking. You can have the most simple, well-prepared ingredients, and that's all you need.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So that's a good point. It's a good differentiation. You don't want to dumb it down, but simplifying something to the point where somebody can grasp the concept of how to behave with forward pressure, back pressure, whatever, based on that. They don't have to understand the math behind it as long as they know how to operate it in a safe way. And that's kind of where I go in that. But to back to your question, the feedback or hearing from, not so much the written word for me, but the most successful thing I've done recently is my ForeFlight workshops. And it's interesting how it became a workshop instead of a webinar. And I'm very particular about correcting people. It's not a webinar, it's not a class, it's not a lesson, it's a workshop, because I found when I teach this topic of navigating, how to use this navigation planner, how to use the app, we're really dumping into how to plan a flight and to some degree navigation basics. But when I go into that with a curriculum, which is how I used to start teaching it, I had a list of all the things I'm going to talk about. Couldn't get through it because people, this is live classes, would ask questions that took me and derailed me off of my syllabus that I had all planned out. And I realized, okay, I don't know what they want to know, and I'm not going to profess that I know what they want to know. So instead of having a webinar where I have this pre-made syllabus, I created a workshop. We're going to plan a flight from A to B today, VFR in such and such airplane. Let's start planning it, and let's see the questions that come up as we go through the planning of this flight. And I let basically the participants and the attendees drive where it goes. Well, that became so wildly uh, popular, and then I took it into online after COVID and did the workshops online, that those are becoming popular. And when I walk around Oshkosh and everybody keeps coming up to me and thanking me, I mean, I can't tell you, I couldn't walk across the field without people walking up to me saying, "Hey, thanks a lot for doing those workshops. I can use that app, and I'm so much better at what I'm doing because of that." That's rewarding, and I enjoy that. That's keeps me going.
That's amazing. Well, and earlier we were trying to talk, Barry, when I first asked you why you started writing, you said, "Well, I wrote this stuff and people liked it." So there's something very validating about when you put work out into the world in whatever form, and you realize it helps people, it increases the quality of their life, or it saves their life, or it makes them a better pilot. It's and again, in this aviation realm, it's just everyone's so passionate about it. We want to help. We want to make people safer. We want to make people better pilots. We want to spread this to more people, make more pilots. So you guys, you're doing God's work. Yes and yes.
But something interesting about what you said earlier is that you don't have to really write it all that well, as long as you can convey something of value to the reader. That's the most important thing. And it reminds me of a famous story about a fellow who wrote a book about his wartime experiences, and he sent the book to a number of publishers, and it was so horribly written that not one publisher would want to take a look at it. They didn't want anything to do with it. And finally, there was one publisher who thought, this isn't really a bad book. We're going to give it to an editor, and maybe we can make the book read a little better for you. Were it not but for that, God is My Co-Pilot would never have been published.
Hmm.
I'm really glad you brought that point up. I don't make any secret about one of the reasons I said I'd like to do this series on the podcast is to drum up business for people to write for Mentor Magazine. Because I want people to understand that your stories are valuable. Your information and knowledge is valuable. Please share it. And one of the main stumbling blocks folks have is, I'm not a writer. I'm not a good writer. I can't do this. I've been a professional writer for a really long time, and I still have those thoughts in my head. Brian, anybody who's being honest would admit that they have those thoughts. I'm not good enough.
I'll bet you every flight instructor has a little story here or there.
I know.
Yeah.
I say it's just the written version of hanger flying is really what it is. And we all love telling stories, aviation stories. So I feel so grateful to have the opportunity with you two. This is just like a highlight to have the two of you here. It's just been a pleasure. All the information you shared with us. I know NAFI members are going to be just thrilled because you two are so wildly popular, and hey Barry, we're really grateful you made the other BS. You guys
I was going to say it was fun, but not that sound right.
well, I hope it was. But it's been a pleasure having both of you on here. So I'm going to ask you again, I'm going to ask each of you this question. If you had something to tell a NAFI member who's thinking about that story or thinking about that time that they might want to, they're considering maybe sort of writing about it for Mentor Magazine, what would you tell them, Brian?
I would say the NAFI slogan, or the NAFI or Nike, just do it. I still learn from new flight instructors. There's some really outstanding flight instructors that are coming up right now. Uh, a young one that I've been talking to locally here, he became an FAA safety team representative, and he reached out to me for help putting seminars together, whatever, and advice. And the more I talked to him, I learned from him, and I'm like, that's fantastic. How is it I went this far and I've never heard that? That's good. So you have to be open-minded to hear from all these other people. And I think most of us have a fundamental curiosity and a desire to learn more. Well, all of you who are flight instructors have these stories that maybe someone else hasn't heard. Write it, send it in, just share your stuff. Pretend the magazine is a forum to share your stuff and help others become better. It's not about reading, the next New York Times bestseller.
And also the gratification you get from passing along a piece of knowledge or information can't be beat. You'll enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm passing along a lot of the stuff that was passed along to me from Dad, but also from other instructors with whom I've flown, with other captain instructors at the airline I saw teaching. So we're a product of everybody that we've experienced, and I, got rid of the things I don't like. I kept the things I really do like. I've refined them and made them better. If you want to tell someone what the center line is for, you ask them, and sometimes it's not as important to tell the real reason, like what is a center line on the runway for? And they come up with this thing about wing clearance or, this or that, or spacing or measurements and this. No, 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 no. It's for professional pilots. So if you change their perspective of what it is they're aiming for, it sometimes puts people right on track.
Well, what both of you have shared just with answering this last question and just through this whole interview is, I think of that saying, a rising tide lifts all ships. And so when we contribute to your student and when you contribute to Mentor Magazine and all the different ways that you both over the many, many years, decades, it just helps the whole aviation community and it makes us all better pilots and better instructors. So I thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having the both of you on here together. And Brian, we're really excited about your upcoming column. So you guys stay tuned for that in the near future.
They're going to be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Beth. You do conduct a good interview, by the way.
Well, thank you so much.
You do give great interview, and I am going to say that the Mentor Magazine has actually it's fantastic. You've done a wonderful job with it, and I think that it's been fun watching it improve so much since you've taken over. You're doing a great job.
I thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate the feedback, and I swear to God, I didn't tell him to say that, you guys. That was unsolicited.
No, I'm honest. If something's boring, I'll tell you. You know
He
it.
does. Yep. See, I'll take it both. I take it. I take all the feedback. So thank you both so much, BSs. And everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us for the Writers Behind the Stories. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. And I invite you to consider sharing your stories. See you next time on NAFI's More Right Rudder podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of NAFI's More Right Rudder podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. You can get this podcast in video version on YouTube, or you can get the audio version anywhere you get your podcasts.